Shiro Kawachi. I'm a social epidemiologist at the Harvard School of Public Health. Welcome to the session on cities as people center space in the era of both pandemic and chronic diseases. So we have three speakers this afternoon. Dr. Osvaldo Artaza Barrios, who is the former Minister of Health from Chile. He's a pediatrician and is currently Dean of the Faculty of Health and Social Sciences at the University of Las Americas in Chile. Our second speaker is Dr. Alida Guevara, who's a pediatrician and now working at the Children's Hospital in Havana, Cuba. And our third speaker is Dr. Jae-sung Kwak, who is Professor of International Development at Kyunghee University in Korea. So let's hear our first speaker and welcome Dr. Osvaldo Artaza. Can we please turn that music off?
Good afternoon. First, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to share on a topic of such great significance to people. Second, sorry with my English. Huh? Yes. A city centered on people is built based on the comprehensive needs, perspective, and involvement of those who inhabit it. A city of communities, which promotes the quality of physical, mental, and relational health of people while reducing environmental impact. An urban model that prioritizes optimal land use without squeezing its advantage, seeking to increase the accessible and nervous supply of public service, reflected in better space. Evaluating the existence of a people-centered city requires analyzing the details of the function that enable the greatest possibility for a good life, allowing the proper development of daily life in the city. In recent decades, there has been a consistent aging of the population in Latin American countries. This aging translates into challenges for state and institutions in terms of adopting measures to address the effect of demographic growth and preparing for the future need of an aging population with multiple comorbidities. In Chile, 86% of mortality is due to non-communicable disease, making them the leading cause of death and years of life lived with disabilities in Chile. Additionally, a high number of people have more than one chronic condition simultaneously. 74% in the 65 and older age group have comorbidity. These problems require social, economic, political, cultural, and infrastructure solutions, along with the social condition in Latin America countries, with high rates of social segregation and poverty. The aging population generates greater social problems. This is because disadvantaged areas show less ease of access, which is cause for concern. Chile is one of the countries with the highest number of older adults in Latin America, and over 82% of the older adult population lives in urban areas. In this context, the government has developed a policy. Is still in initial stage of implementation, centered on the concept of aging in age-friendly space and community, following the objective established by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This policy recognizes that urban factors are relevant to biopsychosocial development and are directly related to public health, especially for the older population and their relation with their environment. The COVID-19 pandemic had a strong impact on older adults, not only in mobility but also in reducing their space, possibility, and balance. 74% of the Chilean population believes that older people cannot make decisions or act for themselves, exposing this group not only to situations of violence, but also to stigmas that erode the self-esteem of older individuals. This form of discrimination, referred to as social punishment towards old age, results in a lack of freedom and autonomy, isolation and loneliness, negative stereotypes, and a lack of trust in their ability to function independently, all of which undermine the self-esteem and well-being of older people, especially older women. In addition to this, there is the socioeconomic reality faced by the elderly population in the country, where at least 38% of older individuals report living on less than $200 per month. It should be noted that the average monthly expenditure of an older adult in Chile is near to $500. The data also reveal that at least one-third older people state that their income does not allow them to meet their basic needs. This reflects the social reality in which older people in Chile find themselves in the post-pandemic period. According to the National Service for Older Adults of Chile, space should be designed to provide different types of access so that the older population can lead their lives in them without age-related limitation. A people-centered city, in terms of the ability of urban residents to create the city and make it their own through their daily lives, activities, and perceptual imaginaries, it's not just about the individual condition of the residential and domestic space for older individuals to achieve physical, social, and mental well-being, but also about an environment that facilitates the comprehensive fulfillment of needs, optimizing opportunity for help, participation, coexistence, care, and security is essential to improve the quality of life as people age. Urban mobility is crucial for carrying out daily activities and facilitating social aspects, promoting relations among people, especially older individuals. Social connections are one of the main determinants of individual health and well-being. Building on the above and thinking about post-pandemic city, the concept of a city where you can meet your needs by walking or using timely and friendly public transport is one of the alternative solutions to urban quality of life problem for older people. Given the high socioeconomic segmentation of the city of Santiago de Chile, there are municipalities that offer space with high level of access to urban facility and are heavily populated by older people. Case like the municipality of Providencia, with high incomes have a very high density of older residents, indicating that older people with higher incomes prefer urban areas with high level of urban connectivity to settle and live over their old age. The profound urban inequality that can be observed in the city of Santiago de Chile make us question the viability of a people-centered city model in the short and medium term, especially when considering the strong economic and social inequality. The Chilean state has committed to addressing the issue of aging with dignity in Chile, but this commitment is hindered by a neoliberal economic development model with an inadequate pension system and a lack of effective social security programs to ensure the future. One of the critical aspects of aging with dignity is secure and well-located housing and timely access to quality medical service. In addition to the ability and access to certain urban facility service or function in the territory, other fundamental aspects must also be questioned, such as one's seat's accessibility condition of sidewalk, quality of public transportation, safety, and how the experience of interaction around certain service can either deteriorate or strengthen the social fabric of community and older individuals, affecting or promoting their physical and mental health. In relation to childhood, it is conceived as a social condition that has been culturally and historically constructed, predefined, and universalized by adults, shaped based on power relationship, corporeality, temporality, and spatiality. Childhood has not been considered, at least from a quality perspective, in the approach and understanding that refer to the impact of city-making models on it. The extremes of life are often absent in the power dynamics that determine city planning. This is the precarity of being children in slums, poor urban settlements where violence, insecurity, and difficulty in accessing education and health care are common, as well as the lives of children in social housing areas with no green space and distant service. Recently, tall building space referred to as vertical ghettos have emerged, where children's lives are marked by a lack of privacy, violence, and a lack of space for play and social interaction. As an example, the Childhood Center and the specialty of our faculty in Universidad de las Américas in Chile conducted a study of the lives of children in a complex of 24-story building with 1,017 apartments ranging in size from 25 to 45 square meters, with one elevator for every 170 apartments, or an average of 508 people per elevator. Children and their parents agree that the building does not have the necessary conditions for the people who live in it, highlighting the fact that each of the space in the building is characterized by extremely small dimensions for both individual and collective use. The idea that this is a building with small and hostile space leads people to see these types of structures as non-place. It should be noted that the real estate sector in Chile focuses on the construction of such buildings, defends their compact design, claiming that having limited space is in line with a more functional, pragmatic, and intelligent urban lifestyle that saves time and money in apartment maintenance, optimize energy efficiency, and provides security for residents. Furthermore, this city concept has tended to prioritize space reduction to strengthen a pseudo-efficiency under the name of the smart city. This is not a smart city. This is not a smart city concept, rather than prioritizing space that balance efficient and ecological resources use with respect for people's dignity and needs. Considering the projection that by 2025, more than 30% of the population will be aged 60 or older, the Pan American Health Organization and the Ministry of Health in Chile have developed the initiative of Age-Friendly Municipality, City and Community. This initiative focuses on several thematic areas: transportation, housing, social participation and inclusion, civic participation and employment, communication and information, community and health service, and outdoor space. Through this area, individuals, especially older individuals, assess the advantages and barriers in their environment. This assessment is complemented by the perspective of service and care provided by the public, private, and voluntary sectors. In addition, for the past couple of decades, as an intersectorial initiative, the Choose to Live Healthy system has been implemented. Choose to Live Healthy program in Chile, in Spanish es Elige Vivir Sano en Comunidad. This national public policy aims to promote healthy habits and lifestyle to improve people's quality of life and well-being. The system is administered, coordinated, and supervised by an executive secretariat under the Ministry of Social Development and Family. Currently, the program is being executed in 340 municipalities across the country with national coverage of 98.6%. It is implemented through policy, plans, programs, and competitive funds developed and executed by various government agencies. Private entity and company in partnership also participate in the system. They seek to promote healthy eating habits and reduce overweight through initiatives that encourage physical activity, family life, care, healthy eating, and outdoor activities. Alongside this, there is the Health Promotion Plus Plans for Healthy Municipality and Community. This program, which began in 1998 in the Ministry of Health, is executed through agreement signed between the 16 regional ministerial health secretariats and the municipality that voluntarily develop a 3-year health promotion plan and meet the participation requirement defined by the program. This program focuses on creating and improving healthy environments in the physical, social, or informational domains, contributing to the increase of health protective factor and fostering the development of healthy lifestyle. Local plans require that local municipal teams can reflect on the territory, social determinant of health and quality of life and translating the needs of the communes into an action plan composed of activities that are part of a pool of options established at the central level according to a now and allocated budget from the regional health secretariat with clearly defined allocation criteria by municipality. This program, in a synergistic manner, is part of the movement of Healthy Municipality, City and Community of the America. This is a regional platform of local government that includes city, municipality, mayor, cantons, community, and association. It has been expanding in America for over 3 decades with the leadership of local governments promoted by the Pan American Health Organization and supported by the health minister of each country. This movement led by mayors, serve as a comprehensive and unifying platform where various health initiatives are implemented synergistically at the local level, including existing network. It also provides a significant opportunity to build alliance and strategic partnership with other stakeholders committed to health and well-being. Currently, near to 3,000 municipalities from various countries in Latin America are part of the network. The most recent meeting took place some days ago in Santiago de Chile in the commune of Huachuraba. This initiative has contributed to fostering cooperation about among committed municipalities around a common regional vision to promote the health and well-being of their population. It facilitates the exchange of experience and best practice in local governance for health, well-being, and equity. It also supports the implementation of national and regional policy that impact health and well-being. Finally, the previous initiative, though still in their initial stage, help us identify some lessons learned. In my opinion, people-centered city required, minimal required. First, intersectoral action that have a positive impact on the social determinant of health and create fair and equitable context conducive to a good life. Two, involving people in the design and implementation of social legitimized policy that transform the city and democratize living and coexisting in the city. Three, addressing the specific needs of older adults and children with a focus on gender and multiculturalism, as well as the particular needs of individuals and a specific group. Promoting local initiatives and empowering people and their community, fostering collaboration, and building the capacity for local problem solving. Putting technology at the service of people's lives beyond its role in production and wealth generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Artaza, for your report from Chile. We have, if there's a question that someone would like to ask. Dr. Artaza, yeah, is there anyone like to ask a question to Dr. Artaza? So I have a question, Dr. Artaza. You showed the apartment buildings in Santiago. So what is the role of regulation? For example, introducing building codes to ensure that each apartment has a minimum size. Is it possible to change the regulation?
It's a very good question,
Yeah.
but we have a very I think the most extreme neoliberalism model in our country.
Yes.
When you have a very extreme neoliberalism economic model, the regulation
Yes.
is little.
Yes.
The role of government structure
Limited, yes.
is very limited.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that is not compatible city center of people.
Yes.
If all is centered in the production and in the economic issues.
Yes.
Okay.
The market.
It's not. The question is, you need a balance.
Yes.
A balance in economical issue, a balance with environment. But the principal focus is in people.
Yes.
But it's not the reality in our country.
So is it not changing even with the recent change in your president and government?
Really? Because we have a lot of resistance
Yes,
to change.
I see.
We have a very young president,
Yes,
but the parliament don't permit any change.
I see. So then-
And it's not
Yeah.
easy for me, but it's a shame.
Yes.
But it's the reality.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Atasa. That's great. So next we have Dr. Guevara, and she is going to deliver her lecture in Spanish. So I think if people would like to use the translation.
Bueno, buenas tardes.
네, 여러분 안녕하십니까?
Como ven, solo hablo español y vamos a tener que acortar la conferencia porque ella tiene que traducir al coreano y del coreano al inglés. Entonces no va a haber tiempo para poderles mostrar todo lo que le traía.
보시다시피 제가 스페인어밖에 할 줄을 몰라서 구사할 줄을 몰라서 제가 스페인어로 발표를 하고 한국어로 순차 통역을 한 다음에 동시 통역이 영어가 제공되는 그런 상황이기 때문에 제가 준비한 발표를 다 해드리지는 못할 것 같습니다.
Estimados colegas, señoras y señores, la salud pública cubana se ha sustentado en principios esenciales como la accesibilidad, la universalidad y la gratuidad, su carácter promocional y preventivo, el internacionalismo, la aplicación de la ciencia, así como el carácter intersectorial, pues la salud pública no es patrimonio exclusivo del sector salud.
네, 참석하신 모든 여러분들 일단 이 자리에 오신 것을 환영합니다. 무엇보다 중요한 것은 쿠바의 공공보건 시스템, 공중보건 시스템은 그냥 전반적인 그냥 시스템이 아니라 기본적인 가치, 보편적 가치, 무상 서비스, 그리고 접근성을 보장해야 한다라는 내용과 함께 또 모든 부문에 횡단적으로 함께 적용되어야 한다라는 원칙 하에 수립되고 이행되고 있습니다.
Traje algunas diapositivas generales para mostrarles, por ejemplo, esta es la ley cubana, la ley magna de Cuba, donde habla que la salud pública es un derecho del pueblo.
네, 그렇기 때문에 우리나라의 일단 최상법인 헌법이죠. 헌법에서 바로 이러한 보건 서비스에 관한 권리가 보장되고 있습니다.
Y aquí tienen las características de que hablamos del sistema de salud.
그래서 제가 도입 부분에 말씀드렸던 특징들을 이 슬라이드에 보여드리고 있는 것입니다.
La salud es un producto social determinado por un conjunto complejo de premisas, condiciones y factores ambientales, biológicos, sociales, políticos y económicos, mutuamente relacionados. El abordaje de los estratificadores sociales, riesgos y vulnerabilidades requieren de intervención integrales e intersectoriales que promuevan la participación comunitaria bajo una voluntad política adecuada.
네, 그렇기 때문에 건강이라는 그 개념 자체는 어떻게 보면 우리가 개인적인 관점에서 도입하는 것이 아니라 모든 그 사회적이고 경제적이고 정치적인 그런 모든 요소들이 함께 도입되어서 또 서로 상호 작용을 하면서 모든 부문을 횡단적으로 적용되어야 하는 그러한 개념이다라고 하겠습니다. 그 외에도 또 사회적인 그런 리스크 그리고 취약성 이런 부분에 관해서 저희가 접근성을 더 강조해야 하는 부분이기도 합니다.
El sistema de salud cubano se sustenta entonces en la estrategia de atención primaria de salud y otorga prioridad a la promoción de salud y prevención de enfermedades. Involucra al individuo, la familia y la comunidad, cuyos propósitos son elevar el estado de salud de la población, incrementar la calidad y satisfacción de los servicios y hacer eficiente y sostenible el Sistema Nacional de Salud.
네, 그렇기 때문에 쿠바의 보건 시스템이라고 할 수 있는 것은 가장 그 핵심에 있어서는 질병의 예방이 있고 그 질병의 예방이라는 것은 1차 보건 서비스로부터 제공되는 것을 주축으로 하고 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 그러한 그 지역 사회의 참여 그리고 서비스의 품질 향상을 굉장히 중요하게 생각하고 있습니다.
Esto es en resumen el Sistema Nacional de Salud cubano, es decir, recoge todas las esferas de la formación, tanto cultural como económica, como social, como del medio ambiente.
네, 그렇기 때문에 지금 보시는 장표야말로 쿠바의 국가 보건 시스템을 요약해 놓은 장표라고 할 수 있겠는데요. 여기에는 문화적인 요소, 경제, 사회, 그리고 환경적인 요소까지도 다 망라하고 있다라고 하면 되겠습니다.
En épocas recientes se ha dedicado múltiples esfuerzos a fortalecer la atención primaria de salud. La fundación en 1984 del programa del médico y la enfermera de familia constituyó un momento cumbre en este sentido y un punto de giro en la concepción de la formación de los profesionales de la salud, quienes comenzaron a tener una presencia cada vez más amplia en el territorio nacional. Todo ello ha permitido a la salud pública cubana grandes logros.
네, 바로 저희가 이러한 부분에 있어서는 아까 말씀드렸던 그 1차 서비스, 보건 서비스에 모든 노력을 집중했고 1984년도에 쿠바 보건 시스템에 있어서 교육 부문에 굉장히 큰 노력을 경주했는데요. 주치의, 가정의 주치의와 또 주치 간호사 인력을 최대한 많이 양육하는 것을 목표로 했었고 1984년이 가장 그 정점에 달했으며 이 모든 그 의료 서비스의 전문인들이 사회에 점점 더 그 영향력을 강조하게 되었습니다.
Estos logros se expresan en los actuales indicadores sanitarios del país, entre los cuales destaca ser el primero en el mundo en eliminar la transmisión congénita del VIH y la sífilis.
네, 저희가 바로 이러한 부분에 있어서는 사실 보건 인덱스들이 전 세계 1위를 우리를 자리매김하게 해주고 있는 그러한 부문들이 있는데요. 예를 들어서 HIV의 그 모자 전염을 근절시킬 수 있었습니다.
Estas y otras fortalezas son claves para enfrentar los nuevos desafíos que se le presentan al sistema de salud, como el incremento del número de personas con 60 años y más, que para el 2025 deben representar el 25% de la población, y el aumento de la incidencia de las enfermedades no transmisibles, principal causa de morbilidad, discapacidad y mortalidad en la isla. Cuba también trabaja sistemáticamente para continuar a la vanguardia de la ciencia y la biotecnología y para enfrentar los efectos del cambio climático.
네, 바로 이러한 부분에 있어서 저희가 또한 새로운 그러한 도전 과제들도 안고 있는데요. 앞으로 2025년도가 되면은 우리 인구의 25% 이상이 60세 이상 노령 인구가 된다라는 것입니다. 여기에서 바로 비전염성 질환들이 가장 큰 비중을 차지하게 되는 것입니다. 그렇기 때문에 이러한 예방 질환들을 예방하는 것을 우리가 가장 중요하게 생각하고 있는 그러한 시스템이 되겠고요. 그리고 그 외에도 사회적이고 그리고 이제 과학의 연구 그리고 바이오텍 그 외에도 환경과 기후 변화의 여파에서 발생하는 문제들도 집중적으로 연구하고 있습니다.
La adopción de la Agenda 2030 para el Desarrollo Sostenible, como ha planteado la Organización Mundial de la Salud, debe hacerse con un enfoque de determinantes sociales de la salud. Su implementación marca un giro importante hacia la acción intersectorial, a fin de alcanzar un desarrollo económico, ambiental y social más justo y sostenible, dado su mandato de colaborar entre los diversos sectores y el papel en la definición de las condiciones en que las personas nacen, crecen, viven, trabajan y envejecen, definiendo su impacto en la salud de la población.
네, 그래서 WHO가 설정한 2025년이라는 그 목표 하에 우리 쿠바의 보건 시스템도 발맞춰서 노력을 하고 경주하고 있는데요. 보다 이 경제적이고 환경적이고 사회적인 면에 있어서 모든 산업의 부문, 경제활동의 부문들을 다 횡단적으로 포함시키면서 이 전체 사회, 그러니까 사람의 그 모든 생애 주기별로 해당하는 필요한 그 보건 서비스를 제공하는 것을 가장 중심에 두고 모든 정책 개발에 노력을 하고 있습니다.
Ahora, teniendo en cuenta los ODS, se hace imprescindible fomentar enfoques intersectoriales y estrategias de desarrollo humano integral, encaminados a reducir el impacto en la salud de las premisas, condiciones y factores que la determinan socialmente. Como contribución a ello se propone revitalizar el funcionamiento de los consejos de salud y del movimiento de municipios, ciudades y comunidades por la salud.
네, 그렇기 때문에 저희가 전 세계에서 SDG에 발맞춰서 함께 우리도 그 모든 보건 시스템에 관련해서 아까도 말씀드렸던 그 다양한 경제와 사회의 부문들을 모두 망라해서 그 사회적인 결정 요소들을 반영하고 그러함으로 그렇게 해서 건강에 시민의 건강에 임팩트를 최소화하는 그러한 정책들을 가장 중요하게 생각하고 있으며 이를 적용하고 있는데요. 그 내에서는 그 제도 중에 하나가 바로 보건위원회라는 것을 우리가 도입을 했습니다.
En Cuba, una de las formas de canalizar la participación social para trabajar a favor de la salud y el bienestar es el Consejo de Salud, representado por la voluntad política, técnica y comunitaria, integradas para trabajar en pro de la salud, donde se combina la tradición de participación comunitaria en torno a la salud con la expresa acción intersectorial a favor del mejoramiento del bienestar de la población cubana.
네, 바로 그래서 보건위원회라는 이런 기구를 통해서 국내에서 저희가 사회적인 참여도를 보다 더 활성화시키고 촉진함으로써 보건 부문에 있어서 그리고 시민들의 보다 건강하고 웰빙을 보장할 수 있는 그러한 채널을 도입했다라고 할 수 있겠는데요. 여기에서는 보다 나은 건강을 보장할 수 있는 그러한 정치, 기술 그리고 사회, 지역 사회의 의지를 반영했다라고 할 수 있고요. 그리고 지역 사회의 참여가 가장 중요한 특징이기도 하며 거기에서도 앞서 계속 언급하고 있는 다 부문의 모든 부문 간의 그러한 횡단적인 액션이 되겠습니다.
El Consejo de Salud se define como estructuras dirigidas por el gobierno e integradas por los factores sociales de una zona geográfica dada para contribuir al desarrollo de la salud pública, sobre la base del bienestar y el fortalecimiento de una cultura de salud, fomentando la participación social como elemento protagónico en el proceso de producción social de salud.
네, 바로 저희 보건위원회라는 것은 정부 주도하에 운영되는 조직으로서 특정 지역의 사회적 그런 형태로 그 구성원들로 구성되어 있으며 공중 보건의 발전에 기여하는 그러한 요소들로 구성되어 있다라고 할 수 있겠으며 이는 그 보건 그리고 웰빙 문화를 강조하는 사회 그리고 공중 보건의 생산적인 프로세스의 핵심 요소로 역할을 하고 있다라고 설명드릴 수 있겠습니다.
Su propósito es contribuir al desarrollo social potenciando acciones sociales, políticas y técnicas que aborden los determinantes sociales de salud, con el fin de mejorar la salud y reducir las inequidades, promoviendo una cultura de autorresponsabilidad y autocuidado por la salud individual y colectiva.
네, 그래서 그 보건위원회가 설립된 목표는 바로 일단 보건의 이제 우선 과제로 정해진 부분에 대해서 서로 필요한 그러한 부문 간의 협력 그리고 상호작용을 촉진시키는 계획을 수립하는 것이고 그리고 모든 사회의 구성 요소들이 서로 자발적이고 그리고 자체적인 책임하에 건강을 더 촉진시키고 더 보다 나은 건강을 영위하기 위해서 질병을 예방하는 데 노력하는 것을 목표로 하고 있습니다.
Los objetivos específicos de este Consejo de Salud tienen que impulsar la formulación de planes intersectoriales que aborden los problemas de salud prioritarios.
네, 그렇기 때문에 우리 국가 차원에서 보건 부문에서 가장 우선시하는 그러한 질병들에 관해서 각 부문별로 서로 어떻게 협력을 할 수 있을까에 관한 계획을 수립하는 것이 구체적인 목표다라고 할 수 있겠습니다.
Fortalecer y estimular la participación de la comunidad en acciones que favorezcan conductas saludables.
그리고 또 모든 시민들이 보다 건강한 그러한 생활 습관을 키우기 위해서 그 모든 환경을 강화하고 또 유도할 수 있는 환경을 만들어주는 것입니다.
Apoyar la formulación y aplicación de políticas públicas que mejoren la salud y el bienestar ciudadano.
그리고 시민들의 건강과 웰빙을 보다 강화하고 개선할 수 있도록 하는 그러한 정책들을 수립하고 이를 적용하는 것이
Y
되겠습니다.
desarrollar la estrategia de municipios, ciudades y comunidades por la salud, priorizando las modalidades en comunidades, escuelas, universidades y centros de trabajo.
그리고 보건을 위한 그 지자체 전략 개발에 있어서는 그 지역 사회, 학교, 대학, 교육기관 등 모든 그 모더리티에서 중요한 역할을 할 것을 우리가 강조하고 있는 것입니다.
Bueno, vamos a pasar cosas aquí rápido porque si no nos da tiempo. En el curso del tiempo en el país se han desarrollado una serie de acciones comprendidas dentro del movimiento a niveles de municipios y comunidades, así como en varias modalidades, llegando a tener 145 municipios incorporados al movimiento, 2.338 escuelas declaradas promotoras de salud, 52 universidades y 1.053 centros de trabajo. No obstante, como proceso ha tenido limitantes en su sostenibilidad, evaluación sistemática y efectividad de algunas acciones. No olvidar nunca el efecto devastador que provoca el bloqueo estadounidense sobre el desarrollo social y económico de Cuba.
네, 시간이 많이 없기 때문에 최대한 빨리 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 바로 우리 쿠바의 보건 시스템을 개선하기 위해서 저희가 최근에 있어서 일련의 운동들을 시작을 했는데요. 이것이 지역사회, 뮤니시팔리티 및 커뮤니티를 중점적으로 두고 한 그러한 프로그램들이 있었습니다. 여기에서 145개의 뮤니시팔리티, 2,338개의 학교, 그리고 52개 대학, 그리고 1,053개의 일터에서 이 프로그램들에 참여를 했고, 이를 통해서 우리가 많은 발전을 이뤘음에도 불구하고 지속 가능성에 있어서 그리고 체계적인 평가와 효과성에 관해서는 아직도 많은 한계가 있었습니다. 더더욱 우리가 강조하고 싶은 것은 미국의 금수 조치에 있어서에 의해서 사회 경제적인 아주 큰 임팩트가 아직도 존재한다는 것을 말씀드립니다.
Ahora, por otra parte, en la actualidad, más de la mitad de la población cubana vive en las ciudades, el 77%, por lo que en tiempos de pandemia son un escenario clave para repensar la vida urbana, considerar temas de movilidad urbana, segregación espacial, diferentes puntos de interacción entre salud y ambiente, así como las dinámicas de cooperación entre todos los que la habitan. Se está transformando en asuntos importantes de interés público y que van a incidir en la forma de habitar la ciudad y de convivir en ella. Del mismo modo, adquieren especial significado las culturas de consumo y producción, encuentros sociales, emplazamiento de lugares de trabajo, actividades de fisicultura, turismo, entre otras.
네, 또 쿠바에서도 전체 인구의 77%가 이미 도시에 거주하고 있는 것이 사실 큰 문제이기도 합니다. 요즘 최근에 있었던 이러한 대유행병들과 같은 그러한 상황에서는 더더욱 그 환경, 거주 환경에 있어서 굉장히 중요한 그러한 조치들이 필요한 상황이고 특히 생산하는 방법이라든지 또는 그 소비 방법이라든지 사회적인 모임을 하는 방법이라든지 여러 부문에 있어서 새로운 정책의 도입이 필요한 상황이 되었습니다.
Estas características particulares entre ciudades y comunidades nos convocan a pensar cómo enfrentar y desarrollar distintos cursos de acción en este nuevo contexto que nos ha dejado la pandemia del COVID-19.
네, 그렇기 때문에 이 포스트 코비드이라는 새로운 환경에 우리가 어떻게 적응할 것인지에 그러한 필요한 조치들의 다양한 조치들을 생각할 수밖에 없는 그러한 상황에 놓이게 된 것이죠.
Esta pandemia ha demostrado de una manera clara que existen diferentes vulnerabilidades que caracterizan una situación de inequidad estructural con importantes dimensiones socioeconómicas y determinantes sociales de la salud que explican finalmente el aumento de los índices de contagio y también del deterioro de una serie de indicadores que afectan las posibilidades de equidad, salud y bienestar de la población. Es así como las grandes urbes constituyen la zona cero para el desarrollo de una pandemia.
네, 바로 코비드야말로 우리에게 있어서 굉장히 많은 취약성들을 명확하게 깨닫게 해준 그러한 질병이기도 했습니다. 특히 사회적 그러한 취약계층에 있어서 아주 불평등한 보건 서비스의 접근이라는 문제들이 있었고요. 그렇기 때문에 그 사회적인 그 건강 결정 요소들에 있어서 굉장히 접근성이 떨어지는 것을 확인할 수 있었으며, 이러한 면에 있어서 우리가 보다 더 보편적이고 더 공정한 보건 서비스를 제공받을 수 있도록 해야 한다라는 것을 사명으로 다시 한번 다지게 되었습니다.
En este escenario es fundamental reconocer la importancia del trabajo en red y fortalecer el rol estratégico que representan los municipios, ciudades y comunidades por la salud. Es justamente en este contexto territorial donde adquiere una especial importancia robustecer el trabajo intersectorial junto a la participación activa de la comunidad y la definición de políticas públicas que acompañen estos nuevos desafíos de construcción de municipios por la salud.
네, 그렇기 때문에 지금 이러한 상황에 있어서는 저희가 네트워크를 형성하고 서로 연계된 상황으로 협업하는 것이 아주 핵심적일 것입니다. 여기에 있어서 우리가 협업하는 전략에 있어서는 도시 그리고 뮤니시팔리티 그리고 지역사회 커뮤니티 등에 있어서 모든 그러한 부문들을 함께 연동해서 협업하는 것을 가장 중점적으로 다뤄야 할 것입니다.
Con la pandemia, Cuba pierde 8.530 habitantes.
네, 저희가 코비드에 의해서 8,530명의 사망을 하게 되었습니다. 쿠바에서는요.
Ahora, Cuba fue uno de los países de América Latina y el Caribe que más tempranamente inició su transición demográfica debido al intenso descenso de la fecundidad, el aumento gradual en la expectativa de vida y el persistente saldo migratorio negativo.
그리고 또 인구학적인 면에서 봤을 때는 중남미에서 지역에서 쿠바가 가장 빨리 노화된 그런 사회로 변화하게 되었습니다. 이는 굉장히 낮은 출산율 그리고 사망률의 감소와 그리고 기대 수명이 증가하며 유아 사망률이 감소하는 그러한 상황에서 발생한 것입니다.
Con 11,1 millón de habitantes en el 2021, el país presenta como tendencia en los últimos años una transición demográfica con muy bajos niveles de fecundidad, 44 años por debajo del reemplazo generacional, bajos niveles de mortalidad, alta esperanza de vida, baja mortalidad infantil y un sostenido saldo migratorio internacional negativo.
네, 그래서 2021년 현재 기준으로 했을 때 전체 인구, 쿠바 인구는 1,110만 명인데요. 여기에서 대부분이 굉장히 60세 이상의 그 인구로 자리 잡고 있는데요. 아까 말씀드렸던 그런 요소들에다가 또 꾸준한 이민자 유출로 인해서 인구가 감소하고 있다라는 것도 그러한 중요한 역할을 하고 있습니다.
En Cuba, la población con 60 años o más ya sobrepasa el índice del 21,3%, de acuerdo con datos de la Oficina Nacional de Estadística e Información. La isla se convirtió en la primera economía envejecida de la región desde el 2010.
바로 우리 국가통계청에서 조사한 결과 전체 인구의 21.3%가 60세 이상 노인이다라는 것을 확인할 수 있고요. 이는 2010년부터 중남미에서 쿠바는 노후 사회로 돌입했다라고 확인하는 것입니다.
Envejecer es un beneficio si asumimos que es el resultado del desarrollo social alcanzado con altos niveles de esperanza de vida. Sin embargo, este fenómeno demográfico le plantea al país múltiples desafíos ante la necesidad de prestarle mayor atención a las condiciones emergentes de una población de edad avanzada cada vez más numerosa.
네, 바로 이런 이제 기대 수명이 늘어났다라는 것은 사회적으로 더 발전했다라고 또 의미하는 그런 긍정적인 표현도 있음에도 불구하고 국가 차원에 있어서 특히 보건당국에 있어서는 굉장히 큰 도전 과제들을 의미하기도 합니다. 왜냐하면 그 노후 인구에서 필요한 그러한 보건 서비스가 점점 더 늘어나고 있기 때문입니다.
Hemos creado universidad para el adulto mayor porque después que terminan su función, digamos, socialmente útil, ellos pueden seguir estudiando si quieren, hacer nuevas especialidades, hacer nueva vida si así lo desean.
네, 그렇기 때문에 우리가 이런 노인 인력을 낭비하지 않기 위해서 우리나라에서는 노인 전문 대학이라는 제도를 만들었고요. 이들을 통해서 이제 은퇴한 후에 제2의 또 생애를 맞이할 수 있도록 준비하는 데 도움을 주고 있습니다.
No obstante, el alcance de esas oportunidades y contribuciones depende en gran medida de un factor, la salud.
네, 그럼에도 불구하고 이러한 혜택을 누리기 위해서는 굉장히 중요한 요소가 있는데 바로 건강이 되겠죠.
La salud en esta etapa de la vida es resultado del estilo de vida que tuvo la persona en sus años previos.
바로 건강이라는 것은 그 기존의 생활의 결과물이다라고 할 수 있겠습니다.
Promover un curso de vida sano es trabajar desde etapas anteriores hacia un envejecimiento saludable.
바로 건강한 노인이라는 그러한 상태에 이를 수 있도록 그 생애 전 단계에 있어서 보다 건강한 습관을 도입할 필요가 있습니다.
El envejecimiento saludable es un proceso continuo de optimización de oportunidades para mantener y mejorar la salud física y mental, la independencia y la calidad de vida.
바로 건강하게 늙는다는 것은 바로 굉장히 지속적인 프로세스인데 그 프로세스 내에서 보다 육체와 정신의 건강을 보다 개선할 수 있는 기회를 확대하고 독립성을 더 키울 수 있으며 삶의 질을 높일 수 있도록 하는 것이 되겠습니다.
Al analizar la situación de esta manera, se hace necesario enfocar la atención en el fortalecimiento de las acciones de prevención y de promoción de salud para proporcionar herramientas y habilidades que permitan lograr un mejor estado de salud y una menor incidencia de discapacidad, contribuyendo así a elevar la esperanza de vida sana.
네, 바로 그렇게 해서 우리가 원하는 것이 바로 교육을 통해서 건강한 노후를 맞이할 수 있도록 시민들에게 그 교육을 촉진하는 것이며 또한 생활 습관과 그 라이프 스타일을 바꾸도록 유도하는 것이 되겠습니다. 그렇게 해서 보다 더 건강한 노후를 맞이하며 국가 차원에서는 더 어떻게 보면 도전 과제를 줄여주는 그러한 상황을 만들기 위해 노력하고 있습니다.
La educación para la salud con el objetivo de impulsar conductas y estilo de vida saludable que se conviertan en factores protectores y determinantes para la salud.
바로 이러한 요소들이야말로 우리 그 시민들이 구체적으로 건강 차원에서 질병으로부터 보호받을 수 있도록 해주는 것입니다.
De igual manera, la actividad física, la alimentación saludable, mantenernos hidratados, moderar el consumo de alcohol, evitar el tabaco, dormir un número de horas suficiente y gestionar el estrés contribuyen a mejorar nuestro estilo de vida, favoreciendo un curso de vida sano y un envejecimiento saludable.
네, 바로 그러한 교육의 일환으로서 운동을 더 많이 할 수 있도록 유도하고 생활 습관에 있어서는 또 건강한 식습관 그리고 수분 섭취, 절주, 금연 또 양질의 수면을 취할 수 있도록 하고 스트레스를 관리하는 그러한 교육들을 하는 것이 중요할 것입니다.
En Cuba, las principales causas de muerte son las enfermedades no transmisibles.
네, 쿠바에서 가장 높은 그 사망 요인은요, 바로 비전염성 질환들입니다.
Y así surge el primer programa cubano para el manejo de la hipertensión arterial, que fue muy bien acogido por la OMS y se extendió a 11 países del mundo.
네, 저희 그래서 쿠바에서는 고혈압 예방 프로그램을 전국적으로 실시했는데 이는 WHO에서 굉장히 긍정적으로 수용이 되어서 전 세계 11개국의 벤치마킹이 되기도 했습니다.
Hay muchas cosas que quisiera compartir con ustedes, pero el tiempo no me lo permite.
네, 사실 더 많은 내용들을 여러분과 공유하고 싶지만 시간이 굉장히 제한되어 있어서 아쉽습니다.
Ahora, Ante esta realidad del creciente ascenso de las referidas enfermedades como principal causa de muerte en el país en la década de los 80, comenzaron a realizarse estudios de la mortalidad de los adultos. Los resultados de esa investigación propiciaron la concreción de proyectos de promoción de salud y prevención de enfermedades, los que se destacó el proyecto global de Cienfuegos, con la conducción del gobierno provincial y la cooperación técnica del Ministerio de Salud Pública, de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud y de la Organización Mundial de la Salud.
네, 저희가 바로 그래서 80년대부터 이러한 이제 건강 습관에 관한 그 조사를 진행을 했고요. 여기에서부터 이제 저희가 봤을 때 사망 요인이 이러한 이 노인 질환들, 그러니까 비전염성 질환이라는 것에 착안을 해서 신푸에고라는 프로그램을 진행을 했습니다. 이 프로그램은 세계보건기구, 그 다음에 미주 보건기구 파호의 지원과 또 우리 보건부의 기술적 지원 그리고 지방 정부들의 많은 협력을 통해서 이룰 수 있었습니다.
Cienfuegos es una ciudad del centro del país, de la isla.
네, 그리고 신푸에고라는 이름이 사실은 우리 그 섬의 중심부에 있는 도시의 이름이기도 합니다.
Ahí se diseña el primer proyecto de intervención comunitaria sobre los principales factores de riesgo para los problemas de salud más importantes identificados en la comunidad.
네, 바로 그 프로그램에서 우리가 최초로 그러한 질병에 관한 리스크 요인을 예상하고 또 그 추세를 예견할 수 있는 그러한 기회를 포착했습니다.
En 1992, el gobierno de Cienfuegos anunció en Sevilla, España, su compromiso con el movimiento de ciudades saludables y de esta forma Cienfuegos se convirtió en la primera provincia de Cuba y de América Latina en incorporarse a este pujante movimiento.
네, 바로 이 도시가 세비야와 1992년 스페인의 세비야와 그 자매 결연을 맺어서 보다 건강한 도시라는 그 프로젝트를 함께 진행을 해서 중남미에서 건강한 도시라는 프로그램의 핵심, 중점적인 역할을 했습니다.
En la actualidad tenemos 145 municipios de 15 provincias que participan en este proyecto.
현재 총 145개의 뮤니시팔리티, 즉 15개 주에서 함께 이 프로젝트를 진행하고 있습니다.
Ahora, una herramienta de mucha utilidad ha resultado ser las encuestas nacionales de salud, de las que se han realizado 4. 3 encuestas nacionales de factores de riesgo, la primera en el 95-96, la segunda en el año 2001 y la tercera en los años 2010-2011, y una encuesta nacional de salud en el 2020. Los datos que a partir de estas se obtienen ayudan a diseñar acciones para hacer frente a la problemática y minimizar los efectos tanto como sea posible.
네, 여기에 있어서 우리가 이 모든 정책이나 프로그램들을 설계하고 개발하는 데 있어서 굉장히 핵심적인 역할을 한 것이 그 전국에서 진행한 보건 부문에 관한 서베이가 되겠는데요. 설문조사였는데 95년, 96년도에 1차를 했고요. 2001년도, 2010년, 2020년 각각 해서 총 4회 그 데이터들을 저희가 확보할 수 있었고 그 데이터를 기반으로 해서 프로그램들을 수립할 수 있었습니다.
De acuerdo a esta reciente encuesta nacional de salud, la población cubana presenta importantes problemas de salud asociados a enfermedades no transmisibles, cuyo comportamiento puede ser modificado si se cambian hábitos de vida, y con este enfoque se comenzó a trabajar desde todos los sectores de la sociedad.
네, 바로 제일 최근에 했던 그 설문조사 결과에 의하면 굉장히 많은 쿠바인들이 비전염성 질환에 의해서 사망을 하고 그 비전염성 질환을 내 걸릴 그러한 리스크가 높다라는 것을 확인을 했는데요. 이러한 질환들은 생활 습관을 변화함으로써 예방할 수 있다라는 것에 착안을 해서 우리가 관련된 프로그램들을 개발했습니다.
En este caso se realizó un estudio poblacional descriptivo transversal y con un diseño muestral que por primera vez incluyó a la población a partir de los 6 años de edad. Con anterioridad, las encuestas de factores de riesgo en Cuba solo tenían en cuenta a los mayores de 15 años.
네, 그리고 이 최근에 했던 이 설문조사에서는요, 이제 그 표본을 설계를 할 때 최초로 6세부터 포함시켰다라는 것입니다. 기존에 했던 설문조사들은 15세부터를 이제 표본에 포함시켰었던 그런 상황이었습니다.
Aquí tienen una comparación más o menos de lo que obtuvimos. En relación con, por ejemplo, se aprecia una disminución en la prevalencia global de tabaquismo en Cuba con un 21,6% contra un 24,% de existencia en el 2010.
네, 그래서 여기에 이제 최근에 했던 그 2회의 설문조사의 결과를 좀 보여드리는데요. 2020년도에는 2010년도 대비 흡연이 준 것을 볼 수 있습니다.
En relación con la ingestión de alcohol se muestran resultados no satisfactorios. En los 30 días previos a ser encuestado, el 73% de las personas habían consumido bebidas de este tipo contra un 67% que lo hacía en el 2010.
네, 그럼에도 불구하고 음주 관련해서는 그 수치가 오히려 더 증가한 것을 볼 수 있습니다. 설문을 시행하기 30일 전부터 얼마나 음주했느냐라는 질문에 있어서 73%의 인구가 음주를 했다라는 것을 답변을 하게 된 것이죠.
Lamentablemente también se aprecia que el 68% comenzó a consumir alcohol entre los 10 y los 19 años de edad.
그리고 가장 심각한 것은 벌써 첫 음주 경험이 10세에서 19세 사이에 일어난다라는 것을 저희가 확인할 수 있었던 것입니다.
También tienen aquí la actividad física que se reportó no activo el 56,3% contra un 46% en el año 2010.
네, 그리고 주기적으로 그리고 체계적으로 운동을 하느냐라는 질문에 있어서는 2020년도에 56.3%만이 이러한 활동을 한다라는 것을 답변을 했고, 이제 수치는 증가하기는 했으나 만족스럽지는 않습니다.
Bueno, hay otros datos ahí, pero vamos a pasarlo en aras del tiempo.
네, 시간이 없기 때문에 나머지 데이터들은 그냥 참고만 하시면 될 것 같고요.
Son cifras realmente preocupantes si se tiene en cuenta la incidencia de todos estos factores en la salud de la población. Es responsabilidad del Ministerio de Salud Pública accionar para minimizar los daños. De ahí esta estrategia que requiere del apoyo de todos los sectores para su efectiva implementación.
네, 바로 우리 쿠바 시민들, 국민들의 건강에 영향을 주는 그러한 요소들이 우리가 파악할 수 있었던 그러한 설문조사이기 때문에 굉장히 많은 우려사항들을 유발시켰습니다. 그럼에도 보건부에서 바로 이러한 문제들을 전략적으로 타개할 수 있도록 많은 조치를 취해야 할 것이며, 이 모든 부문들, 국가의 모든 활동에 그 해당되는 부문들을 함께 동원해서 진행해야 할 것입니다.
Hay 4 líneas de acción en la estrategia.
네, 여기에 있어서 그 보건부가 도입하고자 하는 전략이 있는데요. 그 중에서 4대 축을 설명드릴까 합니다.
Legalidad, intersectorialidad y gestión integrada.
네, 일단은 합법적이어야 되겠죠. 그리고 부문 간 횡단적으로 진행을 해야 하며, 그리고 통합적인 운영이 필요합니다.
Promoción de salud y prevención de las enfermedades no transmisibles con participación comunitaria.
네, 그리고 시민들의 참여를 통해서 비전염성 질환을 예방하고 건강 상태를 촉진하는 것.
Servicios de salud.
그리고 보건 서비스를 강화하고.
Vigilancia, evaluación e investigación mediante la informática y los argumentos económicos.
네, IT 기술과 경제적 효과를 바탕으로 전반적인 보건 상태에 대한 그 감독을 강화하고 평가 그리고 연구를 강화할 것입니다.
Es importante hacer énfasis también en la prevención, el diagnóstico y el tratamiento de las enfermedades no transmisibles.
네, 비전염성 질환에 대해서 특히 예방하고 진단하고 치료하는 것이 굉장히 중요한 축이 되겠습니다.
Justamente en el primer nivel de atención basado en el programa del médico y la enfermera de la familia se encuentra una de las grandes fortalezas para consolidar las acciones contenidas en la estrategia,
네.
que impulsará el enfoque hacia un modelo de cuidados crónicos. Por ello, se hace énfasis en el perfeccionamiento de recursos válidos en el modelo de atención primaria, como son el ingreso en el domicilio y el desarrollo de la concepción y los cuidados paliativos.
네, 그리고 저희 이제 인구 전체를 대상으로 해서 건강 보건 시스템 모델을 수립하는데, 이러한 전략을 실행하는 데 있어서는 각 가정당의 주치의와 주치, 간호사 제도가 굉장히 핵심적이고 중요한 역할을 하게 되는데요. 특히 1차 보건 서비스가 제공되고 그리고 각각 그 거주지에서 보건 서비스를 받을 수 있도록 하는 그러한 제도가 굉장히 효과적이다라고 판단하고 있습니다.
La prevención tiene que llegar a todos y en primer lugar a los barrios, las familias y las personas, sobre todo aquellas que se encuentran en situaciones de vulnerabilidad y pudieran ser más susceptibles a padecer enfermedades no transmisibles.
네, 그리고 예방이라는 개념은 실질적으로 이 전략은 보편적인 그 전략이 되어야 합니다. 특히 취약계층에게까지도 전반적으로 모든 보건 서비스, 특히 질병을 예방하는 서비스가 제공될 수 있도록 해야 합니다.
En este trabajo devienen pilares esenciales la Universidad de Ciencias Médicas con un rol decisivo en la producción y reproducción de los conocimientos, así como el vínculo con la comunidad para la gestión de los cambios que en esta se requiere.
네, 여기에 있어서 핵심적인 그러한 역할을 하는 기관들이 있는데요. 의학 대학들에서 바로 그 지식을 생산하고 또 복제하고 전파하는 역할을 하고 있습니다.
También resulta primordial complementar esta estrategia de prevención y asistencia médica con investigaciones novedosas desde la industria biotecnológica y farmacéutica nacional. En la actualidad, son diversos los proyectos y productos innovadores que se desarrollan en varias instituciones de Biocuba Pharma, dirigidos a hacer frente a padecimientos como el cáncer, la diabetes, las enfermedades respiratorias crónicas y otras.
네, 그리고 또 국가 차원에서 그 약물에 관한 연구, 특히 바이오텍과 의약품 산업에서 이러한 연구를 주도할 필요가 있는데요. 현재 쿠바에서는 바이오쿠바 파마라는 기관들을 통해서 아주 그러한 신물질에 관한 연구가 진행이 되고 있고, 예를 들어서 암이라든지 당뇨 그리고 만성 호흡기 질환 등을 예방하는 데 필요한 물질들에 대한 연구가 진행되고 있습니다.
Desde la integración que distingue el trabajo del Sistema Nacional de Salud, se continúa potenciando el concepto de una salud, con especial atención en los vínculos de las enfermedades no transmisibles con el ambiente, el cambio climático, las dinámicas de la población y las tecnologías.
네, 그래서 우리 쿠바에서는 보건 체계 자체를 하나의 건강이라는 개념으로 모든 전략들을 개발하고 수립하고 집행을 하고 있으며, 여기에는 중심에는 건강이 있지만 이 건강이라는 것이 환경, 기후 변화, 기술 변화, 경제 변화, 사회 변화들이 모두 영향을 준다라는 관점에서 진행을 하는 것입니다.
La complejidad de los problemas sanitarios actuales, los determinantes sociales de las enfermedades y los daños a la salud, especialmente los relacionados con las enfermedades no transmisibles, han conducido a actualizar con celeridad y rigor y creatividad dos mecanismos de gestión esenciales.
네, 그래서 현재 이러한 복합적인 요소들을 고려해서 그 비전염성 질환들에 관한 예방책을 위한 저희가 전략을 수립하는 데 있어서는 총 아주 중요한 두 가지의 그 핵심 오퍼레이션이 있습니다.
Excuse me. Can I just I want to make sure that we give the last speaker enough time.
Tenemos que darle suficiente tiempo al último ponente. Podríamos
sí, ya
ir
termino,
resumiendo.
ya estoy terminando.
We are almost finishing.
El primero es los consejos de salud que ya hemos mencionado antes, y el segundo, el mecanismo, es la rehabilitación del movimiento de municipios, ciudades y comunidades por la salud, que favorecerá a los gobiernos locales la implementación de acciones dirigidas a mejorar la salud de la comunidad mediante la construcción de ámbitos y espacios saludables, con la participación ciudadana y el enfoque de los determinantes sociales de la salud.
네, 그래서 그 두 개의 오퍼레이션은 하나는 이미 설명드렸던 보건위원회가 되겠고요. 두 번째는 지자체들의 그 참여를 통해서 시민들의 그러한 보건활동 그리고 질병 예방 활동에 적극 참여하도록 유도하는 그러한 오퍼레이션이 있습니다.
El Che Guevara dijo hace mucho tiempo que el principio en que debe basarse el atacar las enfermedades es crear un cuerpo robusto, pero no crear un cuerpo robusto con el trabajo artístico de un médico sobre un organismo débil, sino crear un cuerpo robusto con el trabajo de toda la colectividad, sobre todo esa colectividad social.
네, 우리 국가 과거의 대통령이었던 피델 카스트로께서는
No, Che Guevara.
체게바라에서는 죄송합니다. 체게바라께서는 정말 건강한 몸이라는 것은 그냥 의사의 그런 예술적인 그런 치료의 결과에 의하는 것이 아니라 모든 것이 체계적이고 전반적인 그러한 도입이라는 관점에서 건강한 몸을 만들 수 있다라는 거 말씀하셨습니다.
Muchas gracias.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guevara. Because that translation took more time, we won't have questions. We're going to move to the last speaker, who's Professor Jae Sung Kwak, and we'll try and finish on time.
Okay, we have roughly 15 minutes. Okay, I'll try to finalize my presentation in 10 minutes, giving some discount. Actually, coincidentally, Cuba and Chile are two of my favorite countries. I'm a regular visitor of these two countries, and it's my great honor to have both of you. And it was also the wonderful surprise to see how the two cities, especially Santiago and Havana, have changed remarkably for last decades, addressing the all sort of challenges we are having here. We can talk more about your cities. However, I do have my homeworks. Then I will focus on my presentation, which is health, digital, climate change, and access in urban context. Meaning, I will touch little by little of each context in an urban context. City is now responsible for everything these days: populations, disease, GDP, carbon emissions, and global waste, energy, and everything. To address this issue, the first strategy that we adopted is actually the digitization from the late 1990s. I'm pretty sure you recognize one of the gentlemen in the picture, who is ex-president of Korea, DJ Dae-jung Kim, and I wonder if you know the other guy. Maybe you know him, yeah? Masayoshi Son, one of the richest person in the world, in Korean name. He's a Korean Japanese actually, and he's Son Jung-hee. And those two met after the Korea's IMF crisis in 1998. And President Kim asked him what would be the solution for us to overcome this economic crisis. Mr. Son answered in 3 words: broadband, broadband, broadband. And that deeply impressed President Kim, enabled him to promote the digitization of the country. And he started a lot of initiatives, from network building to the venture promotions in Korea. Now, 25 years has passed. This gentleman visited again recently. And last president, President Moon, he asked the same question to him. Always crisis we are in. So what would be the solution, your solution to overcome this sort of crisis? He answered again with 3 words: AI, AI, and AI. Maybe we should focus on our efforts in the AI from now on. However, I'm not able to touch the AI right now here. Then we suddenly come up with the concept of a smart health communities in urban. I'm not going to get into the details, but you know the meaning of that. Teleservice and real-time response to health crisis. And they're also addressed in inequalities and supporting the interconnected health. And suddenly, the pandemic came, the largest one, the COVID-19. And the digitization have played a great role in overcoming this in many corners of the world. So 83% of cities have made large technology investment to improve remote diagnosis and treatment and telehealth services. Not only the health services, but also the educations, finance, and everyday working and digital has become a solution for all of us. However, we do have some issues in certain corner of the world, the countries like Cambodia and Philippines, and due to the lack of digitization and lack of the access to the network service, and they have experienced some divide, social divide, resulted in the lack of the education capacity in certain kids. Now, 3 to 5 years on, and they have witnessed the bigger gap between those children without proper education in the early stages of elementary school. But now they are trying to catch up in their own education framework. And then we have come up with all those kind of information gathering from the health service, especially the communicable disease, or sometimes non-communicable disease as well, especially the COVID-19 situation. I took this picture from the war room style surveillance emergency room in Thailand about that. So many countries have established a similar dashboard by incorporating fully the digital technology into the health policy. Now, cities are going green as well. Cities planned and designed for people with green spaces focuses on. And green approach lower the urban temperature, mitigate air pollution, and build natural environmental resilience and adaptation and mitigation strategies. And improving mobility is a significant factor in going green. That will significantly lower the burden of the urban circle and significantly also lower the healthcare burden as well. If you can achieve this concept of 15-minute smart city to reduce carbon emissions by decreasing the use of cars and motorized commuting time. And some of my colleagues has come up with a brilliant idea in Southeast Asia. This is e-mobility with swappable batteries of the motorcycle. In Korea, scooters are not that much used, except the riders for delivery people. But in some corner of the world, especially in Indonesia, Cambodia, Vietnam, they heavily rely on the scooter for their personal and everyday commuting purposes. Now, the several different kinds of projects are ongoing to change this conventional, traditional, emission-based motorcycle to the e-mobility using the batteries. Batteries are initially charged from the renewable energy, and they put that inside the scooter. Once the batteries are gone, then they have to go to the station and swap the battery, and off you go with the minimum charges. And the later battery can be recycled as well. So this concept is being under construction and actually under application in many corners of the world. So there's a company producing e-scooter, battery pack, charging station, even the e-bike in some countries. We do have many cases of this nexus, health, digital, climate change. Basically, Singapore, Tokyo, and Stockholm, those cities are ahead of us. So you can take a deep look at in the cases if you're interested in. Now, my conclusion. We have good cases, good models, some successful cases. However, we also have to think about how could things go wrong if we do not carefully consider all those nexus and necessary factors in designing the city. We have the city called Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. 8 years ago, there was a construction of urban light rail, 경전철 in Korean, interconnecting from the west end and the east end and the northern end, also southern end. There are 2 lines. What has happened is it ended up resulting in heavy urban congestion without lowering the burdens of the conventional car and trucks and bus transportation at all. The problem is there was a big central road and the half of the road was taken by the urban rail, and rail never runs. Never, this is not an expression, never, rail hardly runs, maybe 3 or 4 times a day currently, which is too small service, and the frequency is getting, larger and larger. There is a big problem in maintenance and also availability of locomotives and also availability of the electricity. So even if the hardware is built, those soft components are the enabling environment that did not make this happen. So we are seriously worrying about the sustainability of this urban light rail in the city. Never share the burden of urban transportation, and also giving another pressure, which is a road congestion and more emissions from the conventional problem. So 7 years later, it faces more problems than ever. We can try the smart city concept. We can try those nexus, health, digital, climate change nexus. However, if we do not take the conventional and integrated and holistic approach, things might go wrong. So I just alarm you by showing these examples. But hopefully, the country can address the issue sooner or later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kwak, for your very timely presentation. So are there any questions to the last 2 speakers, Professor Kwak and Dr. Guevara? If you have questions, just raise your hand and please ask. Any questions, Rona? So I have a question for Dr. Guevara, which is your survey of the health of people in Cuba was very interesting, because you have twice the rate of smoking compared to the United States, and almost similar rates of overweight as well as hypertension, and yet Cuban life expectancy is longer than the United States. Why is that? What is the answer?
Menor violencia en la ciudad.
도시에 일단 폭력이 훨씬 없습니다.
Y menos estrés para vivir.
그리고 생활에 있어서 스트레스가 없습니다. There is no violence in the city, and there is no stress for living.
Is that the secret? Is it?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
Sí, hay mucha alegría de vida en Cuba. La
Yes.
gente le gusta vivir cantando, bailando, y eso
I
le
see.
hace un pueblo muy feliz.
Yeah, I
Cuban
see.
culture is very, it's a very joyful culture. Every people is singing, dancing every day, so there is
I
no
understood
stress.
that. That's very interesting. So, what about COVID? Did COVID affect life expectancy in Cuba?
Tuvimos 8,000 y pico de fallecidos.
우리가 8,000명 이상의 코비드로 인한 사망자가 있었죠.
Pero tuvimos 5 vacunas que producimos nosotros mismos, y eso hizo que se frenara rápido la enfermedad.
그럼에도 저희가 항코비드 5가 백신을 자체 개발함으로써 코비드가 더 이상 문제가 되지 않았습니다.
I see. Thank you. Any other questions from? Yes.
I have a question for Madame Guevara. I'm Olivia. I had the pleasure of meeting with you yesterday at dinner, albeit very briefly. I have been impressed by the healthcare system of Cuba, especially in its community-centered approach and its heavy involvement of these family 가정주치 및 간호사, which is like family doctors and nurses, which I feel like could serve as exemplary examples for South Korea as well to implement some of that aspect. However, I also have a question regarding perhaps one of the challenges that might be a part of the Cuban healthcare system, in that it may be underfunded, which leads to a lot of black market healthcare, such as under the table payments due to the rather low salary of Cuban doctors, whom I believe have their salaries set by the government. Do you have some insight about this phenomenon and what endeavors are being made by the government to address some of these challenges? Thank you.
Tenemos un serio problema económico en este momento en el país.
네, 현재 쿠바에는 굉장히 심각한 경제 위기에 놓여 있습니다.
Después de la pandemia, el bloqueo de Estados Unidos sobre Cuba se hizo mucho más fuerte y más cruel.
코비드 이후에 미국의 금수 조치는 더욱더 강화되고 심각해졌습니다.
Nosotros dependemos mucho del comercio exterior. Tenemos que comprar muchas cosas, sobre todo insumos para hacer medicamentos en el exterior.
특히 우리는 쿠바는 외국으로부터 의약품 그리고 의약 재료를 수입해야 되는 그런 상황에 놓여 있는데요.
Y en este momento el gobierno de Estados Unidos se ha dedicado a impedir que los barcos que nosotros compramos con el medicamento puedan llegar a puerto cubano.
특히 미국의 그 금수 조치 중에 하나가 가장 심각해지고 있는 부분이 바로 그러한 의약품을 싣고 들어오는 그 선박이 쿠바의 항구에 들어오지 못하도록 막고 있는 것입니다.
Entonces gastamos muchísimas cuestiones económicas en tratar de adquirir estos productos que se hacen para Cuba a veces 3 y 4 veces con el valor que tienen para el resto del mundo.
그렇기 때문에 쿠바에서는 의약품 그리고 의약 재료들, 제재들을 구입하기 위한 코스트가 다른 국가에서 구입하는 것보다 3배, 4배 더 비싸지는 상황입니다.
Hemos permitido en el país algunas pequeñas empresas privadas y eso ha roto la estructura social dentro del país.
그래서 그러한 상황에서 이제 국내의 그 민간 기업, 소규모의 민간 기업들이 이제 활동을 할 수 있도록 허가를 내줬는데 바로 이것이 사회적인 체계를 완전히 무너뜨리는 그러한 문제를 야기했습니다.
El problema no está en el salario, el problema está en los precios desorbitantes que esas empresas privadas están poniendo.
네, 바로 급여 수준이 문제가 아니라 이렇게 구입할 수 있는 의약품과 그 관련된 재료들의 고가로 저희가 구입할 수밖에 없는 상황이 문제다라고 할 수 있겠습니다.
Y la población cubana está exigiendo al Estado cubano que tome medidas con relación al control de esos precios.
그래서 정부가 실질적으로 이러한 의약품에 관한 가격 통제 부분에 관해서 뭔가 손을 써달라라고 국민들이 요구하고 있는 상황이죠.
Pero es precisamente eso quizás lo que más me hace sentir orgullosa de ser parte del colectivo de médicos cubanos, porque a pesar de todos esos problemas, seguimos trabajando en beneficio del pueblo.
어떻게 보면 이런 상황 때문에 더더욱 우리가 이 많은 국민들을 대상으로 그들의 건강을 위해서 많은 그 의료진들이 더 희생을 하고 더 노력을 하고 있기 때문에 그리고 저도 그들의 일원이라는 것이 굉장히 자랑스럽게 생각하게 하는 요인입니다. 감사합니다.
If I may ask a brief follow-up question, would that be granted?
I think we're at time, so
right,
you can
sorry.
follow up. Yes. Well, I want to thank all of the speakers for a very informative session. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. We are going to begin in the session in a few minutes. Okay. Some of the most notable lessons include exposing the weaknesses of global governance in health crisis. In the world, there is better governance for trade and protective the interests of money than for protecting people's health, I think. The opportunistic and non-cooperative behavior of the industry and countries, deficiency in communication and risk management, challenges in engaging the population in necessary measures, along with the fragility of healthcare system. The pandemic has taught us that not one is safe alone, that trust in health authority is a valuable asset, that organized communities are an essential pillar, and that there are still many pending challenges for a strong and resilient healthcare system. For these issues, we are talking about in this afternoon. And first, Professor Lawrence Gostin. I present Professor Gostin is Distinguished University Professor, Georgetown University, highest academic rank, and founding O'Neill Chair in Global Health Law. He directs the World Health Organization Center on National and Global Health Law. He serves as the WHO Committee for the Revision of the International Health Regulation, and is also advising WHO on drafting of the pandemic treaty. He has been a leading voice in national and global COVID-19 response. Professor Gostin, please. Thank you.
Okay, you can hear me now? Okay, good. Well, if you can hear me, I don't really need to stand behind the podium. And you're all way back there, so it's a very big room and very few people. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I've been working very closely with the White House and the National Academies of Science and Medicine in the United States, and also most closely with the World Health Organization. And I wanted to talk about the fact that after all of the suffering that the world saw with COVID, all of the millions of lives lost, all of the economic destruction, the loss of education, the collateral damage of failure to keep up with our Sustainable Development Goals, AIDS, TB, tuberculosis, childhood vaccinations. After all of that, we owe it to ourselves and to our children and to our grandchildren to make the world much fairer and safer when the next global health emergency strikes. And as I've written in JAMA and elsewhere, it's very likely that we will experience more catastrophic health events in our lifetime. The number of novel diseases from MERS, SARS, Ebola, and of course Zika, Mpox, and COVID have just gotten amplified. And there are multiple drivers of pandemic risks, including pandemic risks from animal spillovers, from climate change, from mass migration, from hyper-congested cities, to the rapid speed of travel and communications. And so it's not a question of whether we will have another pandemic, but when. And in between, we're probably likely to see a number of highly novel infectious diseases emerging. If history is any lesson, then Asia may very well be an epicenter for that emergence of a novel infection. And whether it's a coronavirus or an influenza virus or hemorrhagic disease, we're going to experience catastrophes. So with all of that we've been through, now we're facing really an historic opportunity to change the world and to make it a better place. Better prepared, better scientific research and exchange of information, more rapid delivery of medical countermeasures like vaccines and therapeutics, diagnostics, personal protective equipment. And there are at least 3 or 4 seismic events that are ongoing in New York and Geneva. This past September, I spent the week in New York City at the UN high-level assemblies at the General Assembly. These high-level summits were on universal health coverage, on tuberculosis, but perhaps most importantly, on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. And the UN General Assembly adopted an historic political declaration on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. I've written about that, and while the UN did not make the kind of concrete pledges to financing and other normative obligations at the time, the very fact that the United Nations was able to come together and adopt a high-level political declaration on this subject was a great catalyst. So the first major event was the high-level summit and the political declaration. And why New York is needed for these events is because the World Health Organization, as wonderful it is, and I work very closely with it, with Tedros and others, it's still principally governed by health ministries. And we need an all-of-government approach and need high-level political support of heads of government and heads of state. And that's why the UN General Assembly political declaration was important. The declaration really supports three major reforms that are ongoing in Geneva. And I'm going to discuss all three of them, and then I'm going to give you my my ideas about the four major things that we need to do to what I've called future-proofing the world against pandemic risks. It's an article that just came out this week in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. So what are these Geneva negotiations? The first one is on reform of the international health regulations. I have to make a disclosure. I'm a member of the WHO IHR Review Committee. But essentially, the international health regulations have been the governing instrument for pandemic risks, or what's called public health emergencies of international concern, ever since WHO was founded in 1948. In fact, in 1948, the very first act of the Assembly was to adopt the then international sanitary regulations, which are now the international health regulations. These regulations were revised substantially in 2005 in the aftermath of SARS. Now, with COVID-19, the United States began by making a number of proposed amendments, quite fundamental amendments to the IHR, and these were then followed by countries from around the world. And so right now, there are over 200 proposed amendments by key blocks of states, Europe, the United States, the African bloc, and Asian bloc. And so we have these negotiations. They're going fairly well in Geneva, and I expect that before the May 2024 Assembly, we're going to have a major revision of the international health regulations. That's just my prediction. We don't know for sure, but the negotiations are going well in Geneva, highly constructively. Just to give you one example, compliance and implementation and enforcement have been really major issues with the IHR. You'll recall there was widespread disregard of WHO recommendations during COVID-19, as well as widespread disregard of the binding obligations of the international health regulations. An example of that would be the widespread introduction of targeted travel restrictions. Just to give you an example, when South Africa identified the Omicron variant, it immediately sequenced the genome of that variant and announced it to the world and shared the data with WHO. Rather than getting rewarded, countries around the world targeted it with travel restrictions that harmed it. The United States and the African bloc actually both have complementary mechanisms that they've proposed. One has proposed a compliance committee, and another an implementation committee, and there are negotiations going on about how that will take place. The second major revision is in WHO financing. The World Health Organization, as Harvey Feinberg said, more than probably 15 years ago, has global responsibilities that are entirely incommensurate with the amount of funding that it gets. And this has compounding problems. The first problem is that the World Health Organization simply doesn't have enough money to do all the things it needs to do. Pandemic preparedness, NCD, prevention and control, injury prevention and control, mental health, and the list goes on and on. Its funding is woefully inadequate. But at the same time, WHO only has control over about 20% of its budget. You give me any organization that can control 80% of its budget, and that will be a dysfunctional organization. And so the World Health Assembly last year passed a resolution to gradually increase the assess, that is the mandatory contributions to WHO. The United States and President Biden, and I worked with the White House on this, supported it, and we saw the first step taken. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the pandemic agreement, or more commonly called the pandemic treaty. Right in the at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, something like 40 heads of states and international organizations called for negotiations of a pandemic treaty. The World Health Assembly adopted that recommendation, and they designated an intergovernmental negotiating body, the INB, to negotiate that treaty. And there's been negotiations ongoing in Geneva. In the most recent meeting of the parties, they released a final negotiating text, and that is currently being negotiated. Now, while I think that the IHR negotiations are going well, the pandemic treaty negotiations are not going well at all. There are huge disagreements. Fundamentally, the disagreements are between high-income countries and low and middle-income countries. What high-income countries want is robust sharing of scientific information. They want rapid reporting. They want open databases of research. They want the rapid and transparent sharing of pathogen samples and genomic sequencing data. And of course, high-income countries are right. We do need these things. You can't get the rapid development, research and development of vaccines and therapeutics without that kind of scientific exchange. COVID-19 in some ways was a marvelous example of global ingenuity. Normally it takes about 10 years to develop a vaccine. In some cases, we never get a vaccine. For example, with HIV/AIDS, at least we haven't yet. The very quickest we've ever done it in our history is mumps, and that took 4 years. And yet we had several food and drug authorized vaccines that were authorized within a year for COVID-19. 2 highly effective messenger RNA vaccines, the very first time we've ever had an mRNA product reach the market. And then there were a number of other vaccines. Sinovac in China would be one example. The AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine would be another example. And now we have a number of others, such as through Novavax and other platforms. That was a marvelous achievement. In the next pandemic, we need to do it even quicker. And we need to have a system where the supplies of vaccines and therapeutics are not scarce, where high-income countries don't pre-purchase vaccine supplies and prevent the full and equitable and affordable access of those vaccines in sub-Saharan Africa, the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, and other areas of the world. Latin America would be another example. So low-income countries, they don't really want to exchange scientific data, genomic sequencing and pathogen samples, unless in exchange for that, they can get a guaranteed mechanism for equity. There are, I think, 3 major proposals for equity mechanisms in Geneva. It may not be that the pandemic treaty has a robust mechanism for any of these 3. In my view, we need all 3. For all of the history of the world, the way we've dealt with equity is on the basis of charity. That is, high-income countries and large pharmaceutical companies charitably donated vaccine or therapy doses to low-income countries. But what Africa knows is that charity always comes too little and too late. And so they want the ability to manufacture, research and develop and manufacture medical countermeasures for pandemic risks themselves. And so as a result, the WHO has supported what's called the Messenger RNA Hub, a network, beginning with one in Cape Town, South Africa. So one mechanism is what's called technology transfer, to enable low and middle income countries to develop their own vaccines. And we may see this on a regional level. So here in Asia, you've got regional capacity for pandemic preparedness and response. In Africa, we're hoping that through the Africa CDC and the African Union, we can do the same. PAHO and the OAS in the Americas would be another example. The second equity mechanism are intellectual property rights waivers in health emergencies. This bumps up against another set of laws at the World Trade Organization. What's interesting is that when the African bloc, or what's called the Friends of Equity bloc in Geneva, wanted to get an IP waiver into the pandemic treaty, immediately on the day it happened, the German health minister came out and said it's a non-starter. The European Union said it was a non-starter. The United States, so far, they have been, President Biden did support a vaccine, an IP waiver for COVID-19
Professor
vaccines.
Gostin, sorry.
Oh,
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. I've got really good stuff I can talk about. So why don't I just talk, I'll just give you the 4, I'll give you my 4 suggested key things that we need. The first one is we need robust scientific exchange. The second thing we need is the ability and clear and concrete mechanisms to deliver those vaccines and other medical countermeasures in a fair and equitable way through the 3 mechanisms I mentioned, or I didn't mention. IP waivers is one, technology transfer and diversified manufacturing is second, and the third is what's called a pathogen access and benefit system, like the pandemic influenza preparedness framework. The third thing we need is financing. We can have robust health system responses, and we can't have diversified manufacturing unless there's a robust financing mechanism for it. So far, that doesn't exist. The World Bank has a pandemic fund with an estimated hope of getting $10 billion per year, which is already too little. They've only got $1.5 billion. So financing is a big stumbling block. And then the fourth key proposal I wanted to make is One Health. We need to deal with pandemic risks in a holistic way. That includes human health, systems of surveillance, epidemiology, countermeasure response. We need animal health so that we actually have good surveillance and control of animal populations, and that we separate human and animal populations to prevent zoonotic spillovers. And we need action on climate. So the health of animals, the health of humans, and the health of the environment are all essential to prevent pandemics. And by the way, these are all essential for livable cities, full stop. So the One Health approach would be my additional and very strongly proposed intervention that we could hope to see in Geneva. I'll just simply conclude by saying that we're at the precipice of an historic moment in global health, one that we haven't seen since the formation of the United Nations and its first specialized agency, the WHO, in 1948. And after all we've suffered, we should be ashamed if we can't negotiate and adopt a robust pandemic treaty and international health regulations with proper financing that could make the world much safer and much more fair for all of the people in the world today, our children and our grandchildren. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to go over.
Thank you very much, Professor Gostin. Now, Professor Hashimoto, Professor of the University of Tokyo School of Public Health. Please, Professor Hashimoto, 20 minutes for have time to question. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Hideki Hashimoto from the University of Tokyo. I have a background as a certified internist in Japan, but I acknowledge that the Professor Austin can count far more than number of the emerging diseases than I can. But today, I come here not as the internist, but the public health researcher and the practitioner who observed what happened in the time of the pandemic in Japan. Today's topic is, I assume, the governance. And in this term, I think there are comparison between the Korea in the response to the pandemic. The Korea and Japan makes a nice contrast. In Korea, you may know that the successful care quarantine system with the high-tech ICT use and the strong leadership and the hierarchical, clear command system, the strong governance worked very well. Compared to that, maybe the Japan has the very poor use of the ICT. Sometimes the central government and the local government in the prefectural level has the miscommunication. So in this case, the Japan has the decentralized, non-hierarchical, and maybe poor use of the ICT. So if you say the strong governance is the key for the counter against the COVID-19. Maybe Japan had their menace situations. But I will present shortly. Japan did not such bad. So this tells something about what is the governance we need to counter against this pandemic type of the difficulties. Oh, thank you. And yeah, let me start. This is some profile about this COVID-19 in Japan until today. Sorry about this. The Japanese they included in the slides. These show the number of affected patients per day and the cumulative numbers and the death per days. But we can say that in terms of the total number of the affected and compared to that with the infected and the dead, the case fatality rate was in total like the less than 1%. Not such bad. And did we do quite well about the vaccination things? Maybe, maybe not. In total, we have nearly the 80% coverage of at least one shot of the COVID-19 vaccinations, but only after the 21 June or afterward. And before that, we already had some kind of control over the pandemic things already. So there are the attribution of this vaccination to get their herd immunity and herd immunity may or may not the cause of the Japan's the relatively successful control over the COVID-19. And in terms of the finance things, the Japanese government did some subsidy to help the hospitals the counter against this COVID-19 because of the financial crisis that makes the hospitals the performance quite difficult. And with this subsidy, yes, some the acute hospitals beds could work very well in a sustainable manner. And in terms of the resource allocations, however, we observed the quick shortage in the nurses in the hospitals as well as the public health sectors. And in terms of the functions, that we did have some the impact by this COVID-19 on the regular healthcare provisions. We did observe there some sustained surgical treatment for cancers, and which leads to unfortunately the increase of the cancer rate and mortality during the time. But all these things may not be very unique in Japan. Maybe every country so there are the same kind of the situations. And another impact by the COVID-19 is, of course, by the non-health sector things, especially about the economic side. This shows the trend of the unemployment rate and the salary ratios over the time. And we did observe the economic downturn during this pandemic time, and especially in terms of the retail sections rather than the production sections. But this quickly kind of get some recovery after the 22 summer. And the country that we are observing another shock by the, as you may know, another shock by the emerging energy shock. And even though within the health sectors, we did observe the aftermath by the COVID-19 in terms of the suicide rate increase among the youth, and especially those who are in non-regular workers. And we assume that this is because of the tentative economic conditions during the time. But again, this is also a kind of getting in the recovery stage. Now, did Japan better or worse or so-so? Maybe, maybe not. But taking this, that we have to think about what was the challenge by this pandemic at all. Now, what is the characteristics of this the challenge? And we may say that yes, COVID-19 was the menace virus, not such bad compared to the SARS, MERS, and Ebola, but still it has an impact. But the basic and the basis of this the challenge was the unpredictability, uncertainty, because we did not know beforehand what it is, and we don't have the countermeasure like the vaccine or medication things. So the uncertainty, unpredictability, and uncontrollability, now all these stuff are the emerging the difficulty caused by this pandemic. And what we need to countermeasure this, we need their new system that effectively treat this unpredictable, uncertain challenge in a more flexible, rational, and efficient manner. And this is a point that we need a new type of governance. Not necessarily hierarchical, strong governance, but maybe another shape, another form of governance. And some of the cases in the local case in Japan may tell something, a kind of hint about this new type of the governance. There is something that I would show. Within the domestic comparison, and in Japan, we have the 47 prefectures. And for your information, we do have there the very nice the universal health coverage. Almost more than 80% are covered by public payment, very small co-payment. And in Japan, we have the highest in the density of hospital beds on the globe, or maybe the second compared to the Korea. So in terms of the available medical resources, we have the almost homogeneous stage over the country. Even with that, this graph shows that the mortality per 1 million population by the 47 prefectures tells something. We did have the difference across locals. And we have to think about why. And I said, it's not about the medical accessibility or resources or some kind of medical technology things. And closer look at this tells something about governance. As I said, the Japan, its political long history, we have the decentralized system of the policy administrations. Even today, the universal health coverage is under the central control by the Central Ministry of Health. We do have the decentralized operational systems across the country. And with decentralized systems, that each local has a different level and the styles of the governance. Some has a very strong hierarchical one. Some has the very technocratic, bureaucratic style of the governance. And the other shows the more informal type of the local, weak, but very connected networking governance. And Ralph Ibor said that the strong governance does not necessarily always good. Let me take the one example of the Okinawa prefecture, which is the most southern part of the island prefecture. And once it is known the octogenarian and then generian, the long life the country, but today because of its limited economic conditions, actually the poverty rate is the highest among the country, and we have the only the very limited the life expectancy the ratios within the country, and they have the very few the hospital and the physicians per populations, and they will suffer the island remote conditions, which has the very challenging in terms of the healthcare access. Even with this, the Okinawa did very good. And the reason was that even with this small and limited number of their healthcare systems, these healthcare systems have the alliance informal networking. And with this networking, they use this limited resource very efficiently. And this helps them to save the life. And compared to that, the Osaka city, for example, this is the second largest metropolitan country and city in Japan. This Osaka, with one of the highest number of the bed and the physicians, and with the high tech and the hospital, national center and national medical center, which can treat any heart transplantation and everything, they suffered the highest case fatality among the prefecture. The reason was that the prefecture level and the municipality level had the conflict in terms of the governance style, and they have the miscommunication. They couldn't use their systems efficiently across the border. So this tells something. And another was the Tokyo Metropolitan Sumidaku, which was another success story about the soft networking. The Sumidaku is the downtown Tokyo, which is very susceptible to flood. Once the Arakawa River flooded, it will be underwater for 2 weeks, and maybe the isolated. And with this, the expectation against the disaster, they already prepared the disaster medical team already. And with this, they already have the soft informal networking within the Sumidaku. And they use this very nicely, like in the Okinawa case, to counter against the COVID-19 for the patients or the trajectory and other kind of stuff. So my conclusion is for your further discussion, the governance innovation for crisis matters. And this the new challenge that gives the nice test case of we can develop the more flexible networking for emergence as a new type of the governance to counter against the unpredictable and uncontrollable situation for flexible and efficient and speedy countermeasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Hashimoto. Yes. And now, Professor Young, Director General, Bureau of Infectious Disease Emergency Preparedness and Response, KDCA. And then, after Professor Young's presentation, I think that we have a time for question and commentary. Huh? Please, Professor Young.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dong Young-jung, and I'm from the KDCA. It is a great honor to be presenting and discussing with Dr. Lawrence Gostin and Dr. Hideki Hashimoto and other world-renowned scholars today. And the truth is, I'm not an expert in governance, and I have very little academic knowledge in this area. However, having worked as a public servant for more than 20 years and having experienced a significant amount of how governance works in the national policymaking process, I would like to share with you my personal experience of how a crisis response governance has worked in South Korea during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what I see as its strengths, and I want to share that what I see as its Korea's response strengths and weakness. And please note that these are my personal views, and there is no official opinion from the Korean government. I think the governance is one of the those words that so commonly used, and yet no elusive so commonly used, but yet so elusive in terms of what it means. Many scholars and organizations have their own definitions of governance, but most of them, none of them are universally accepted. In 1993, the World Bank defined governance as the method through which the power is exercised in the management of a country's political and economic and social resources for development. It's worth noting that the words, the power and resource here. Governance is fundamentally about power, and we can say that it's about decision-making authority as it relates to mobilizing and managing the resources. So when we discuss governance, we often think of the questions like these: who has the power and who make decisions, and how are decisions made, and how stakeholders make their voices heard, and who is accountable. This slide presents the main characteristics of principles of good governance. The UNESCOP has identified 8 attributes of good governance: the participation, consensus orientation, accountability, responsiveness, effectiveness, equity, and rule of law. The reason I am reminding you of this classic attribute of good governance is because I'm going to look at the South Korea's pandemic response governance around these 8 attributes. Before I dive into the Korea's governance, I would like to briefly review what good governance means in the field of public health. There are many different definitions of public health, but I'd like to use the classic definition of the Winslow, who defines public health as the science and art of preventing disease, prolonged life, and promoting health through the organized efforts and informed choices of society, organizations, and public and private communities and individuals. From this definition of public health, we can draw some implications about the attributes of good governance in the public health domain. The good governance should contribute to the primary goals of public health. That means disease prevention, life prolongation, and health promotion. And also facilitate organized efforts to realize public health goals. And the governance should empower stakeholders to make informed choices. And lastly, it should integrate both public and private sectors within a comprehensive multi-tiered framework that includes individuals, organizations, communities, and society as a whole. And now I would like to discuss some of the characteristics of good governance that South Korea has shown strengths in during the COVID-19 response, as well as some need to be strengths. The South Korea's governance has some responsiveness and effectiveness and efficiency and accountability and transparency. And also it shows some evidence-based policy making system and the good rule of law. This slide shows that the crisis response system in South Korea. South Korea's crisis management response system is organized into 4 phases: the watch, the caution, alert, and serious, which are largely determined by the scope and the level of transmission of the infectious disease. The KDCA takes center stage in the first and second level of crisis alert. In crisis level 3 and 4, the KDCA will still lead the public health response, including surveillance, diagnosis, and epidemiological investigation and social distancing. However, the Ministry of Health and Welfare will step in and work closely with the KDCA from alert level 3. When the widespread community outbreaks requires greater mobilization of medical resources and compensation for the socioeconomic damage. The KDCA is primarily responsible for the public health response, while the Ministry of Health and Welfare is responsible for the mobilization and management of healthcare resources, including hospital beds and medical personnel. The level 4 is the highest level and requires the intergovernmental and intersectoral response. At this stage, the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters is formed, led by the Prime Minister, and 41 ministries, central administrative agencies, and 17 provinces come together to make joint discussions, the decisions. So we did everyday this headquarters meeting in the early phase of COVID-19 and invite more than 2,000 people using the IT technology. In order to effectively respond to a disaster situation, a certain amount of command and control style leadership is required. And in Korea, which has a long tradition of the vertical bureaucracy, this crisis response governance worked very well. However, this governance has not worked effectively for all decisions. One example is around the introduction of COVID-19 vaccines. South Korea signed contracts with major companies to introduce the vaccines in December 2020, which was rather late compared to other developed countries. So why the discrepancy? The one thing comes to mind is the risk aversion of actors involving in decision making. In South Korea's response to MERS, the country has criticized for failing to act quickly enough to prevent the spread of disease, and subsequent decision making, especially in the early stage of the outbreaks, focused on the speed of policy decisions and preemptive actions. On the other hand, during the 2009 H1N1 influenza outbreak, health authorities in Korea were criticized internally for introducing too many medicines, such as Tamiflu, relative to the severity of the disease. We believe that this experience may have influenced them to make more cautious decisions regarding vaccine introduction. What I want to emphasize here is that the good governance is not just a matter of having effective decision-making bodies. It is also a matter of bringing together the various institutional arrangements that enables those bodies to function well. This slide is a comparison of the role of KDCA in crisis response before MERS and after MERS. This reflects the situation that KDCA was not yet elevated to KDCA, so there's a little bit a different difference. We use in this slide we use some different terms than now from now, and however, what I want to emphasize here is that the CDC's role was previously limited to the lowest level of crisis, the level 1. But after the MERS outbreak, the CDC is responsible for leading the public health response through all stages, from level 1 to level 4. While the Ministry of Health and Welfare and Ministry of Interior and Safety and Office for Policy Coordination and other ministries are responsible for repairing the overall socio-economic damage beyond the health sector and helping society as a whole to recover and bounce back quickly from the crisis. This concept became clearer when KCDC was upgraded to the KDCA. South Korea has also a legally well-established national disaster safety management system. The Framework Act on the Management of Disaster and Safety defines 41 types of disasters, including 13 natural disasters and 28 social disasters, and designates a lead agency for each type of disaster. In addition, to ensure that relevant ministries and agencies can quickly fulfill their roles in the event of a disaster, we have prepared a crisis management manual that specifies the activity standards and action procedures and responsibilities and roles of each agency, and detailed tasks to be performed, and the department and personnel in charge of the tasks. These crisis management manuals are constantly being revised and updated based on our experience with each new disaster. The Crisis Management Standard Manual specifies the disaster management system for each type of disaster and is written by the head of disaster management agency. The Crisis Response Practice Manual is written to prescribe the measures that and procedures for each organization related to disaster management. And there is a separate on-site action manual that prescribes procedures for conducting the on-site actions. The South Korea has 41 crisis management standard manuals and 39 crisis response practice manuals and over 8,000 on-site action manuals, of which one standard manual and 17 practice manual and 271 action manuals are specific to infectious disease disasters. Having these specific manuals in place allowed the various ministries and local government involved in the pandemic response to fulfill their roles with a high level of accountability. This is the example of the crisis management standard manual and the crisis response practical manual. So the content is slightly different. And now I want to move on issues of transparency and public trust. This slide is written in Korean, so I'm sorry for I have not having the time to translate it into English. One of the critical lessons learned from the Korea's experience with MERS was the role of effective and transparent risk communication in managing infectious diseases. There was a big argument against disclosing medical institutions where a patient with MERS has visited. Also, the one voice principle was not followed well in the communication between the central and local government. Consequently, the government's poor response to the MERS outbreak caused confusion and increased the level of distrust among the citizens. Based on this experience, South Korea has put a lot of efforts into risk communication since the beginning of COVID-19 response, including transparently disclosing all informations and holding daily media briefings. This is evident in the fact that the South Korea has identified transparency and democracy and openness as three key values to uphold in its COVID-19 response. When people's trust in government policies is high, they are more likely to be receptive to them. which is a valuable social capital for fostering the whole of government approach. This is also known that when people have trusted government institutions, their trust in the policy also increases. This slide shows that the result of a pandemic response entity trust survey conducted in October 2023. The highest ranking is the public healthcare hospitals and organizations, followed by the KDCA, which is the most trusted central government agency. The survey has been conducted regularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's encouraging to see that the public trust remains above 70% the more than 3 years after the pandemic began. The question I want to ask here is, how did the high level of public trust in KDCA come about? There are many factors, but I think it's because the KDCA has been steadily strengthening its capacity through several infectious disease outbreaks since SARS, and has been perceived by the public as a professional administrative organization that is not swayed by the politics. I mean the politics in a bad way, and makes public health policy based on the best available evidence. This slide shows how KDCA has grown organizationally in response to infectious disease outbreaks. KCDC was established in 2004, shortly after SARS outbreak in 2003, by reorganizing the existing National Institute of Health. Unlike the United States, South Korea combines the public health policy functions of the CDC and the biomedical research functions of the NIH into one agency. But the renaming of NIH to the CDC can be seen as a further strengthening of the role of the administrative response to the infectious disease crisis. In 2016, shortly after the MERS outbreak, the head of KCDC was upgraded from the deputy minister to vice minister, further strengthening its administrative authority. In a country with a highly hierarchical bureaucracy like South Korea, the status of the head of an agency or institution is very important in getting things done. For example, when some organization calls a meeting, it is customary for the attendants to be the people who are one position below the person who organizing the meeting. Therefore, if the head of agency has a low status, it becomes very difficult to convene the high-level meetings that invite the high-level officials from various related ministries or agencies to make the high-level decisions. So in 2020, during the current COVID-19 pandemic, the KCDC was granted a legal status as an independent central administrative agency from being an agency under the Ministry of Health and Welfare. This change is significant because when KCDC was under Ministry of Health and Welfare, it did not have independent budgeting and personal authority. With its elevation to KDCA, the agency now has independent authority over its organization and personnel and budget, which means that the head of agency is not beholden to Ministry of Health and Welfare and can implement policies based on the agency's own vision and priorities.
Professor Yang?
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Okay. And the KDCA also has legal authority to revise and enforce laws and on the prevention and management of various diseases, including the infectious diseases. Currently, we have 5 laws, including Quarantine Act, under the sole authority of KDCA, and 2 are under the joint authority with the Ministry of Health and Welfare. So this is the name of the laws that we have the authorities. Here I want to reiterate the importance of legal foundation for effective policy implementation. So when the MERS outbreak, before the MERS outbreak, we have only 34 epidemiological investigators around the nation. But we revised the Infectious Disease Control and Prevention Act twice. The first revision was done in 2016. The second revision was done in 2020. So you can see from the slide that right after the revision of the Infectious Disease Control Act, the number of the epidemiological investigators increased very rapidly. So this is why I emphasize the role of the legal foundation. So I will skip this. Now I'd like to move on to the characteristics of governance that South Korea could or should have done better. But because of the time constraints, and I want to skip most of the part. So this is one example of our weakness. We sometimes confronted the disagreement between the central government and local government. This is a newspaper article from South Korea where there has a disagreement between the central and local government over whether to continue wearing the masks indoors. The mayor of Daejeon City announced that the city of Daejeon would lift its own mask mandate as it has now time to remove the mask indoors, while the central government took the position that such decisions should be made in consultation with the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters, as they could affect the other regions. So South Korea's Infectious Disease Prevention and Control Act authorized the Minister of Welfare and Commissioner of KDCA and provincial governors to adopt various public health measures to prevent and control outbreaks, including the mandatory use of masks. However, the authority of the city governor is limited to city under their jurisdiction, while the authority of Minister of Welfare or the Commissioner of KDCA is nationwide. What this means is that even if a provincial governor relaxes quarantine measures on his or her own, the Minister of Welfare or the Commissioner of KDCA can immediately impose the same measures in that province if they deem it necessary. Thus, the while decision-making effort was formally the consensus-oriented, in practice, a command and control decision-making structure was in place. So it's maybe my last slide. The Korea's disaster management system has been built on the assumption of short-term disasters. However, the policies that prioritize risk reduction in certain sectors in the short term may conflict with the policy goal of other sectors in society. And even if implemented over a long period of time, these policies may conflict with various social values. Therefore, it is necessary to build a sustainable public health crisis governance that can coexist with other sectors, even if pandemic is prolonged. Such public health crisis governance requires a collaborative response across social, economic, and welfare sectors that goes beyond the health sector. The Korea's the governance structure can be said that as a typical command and control type, and I believe that a transition to a more centralized nodal governance structure is necessary for the sustainable governance that is more flexible and enables the voluntary participation of each actor. In my view, the nodal, this kind of the decentralized nodal governance is a system in which the chain of command is not fixed, but rather it can be changed depending on the nature and the stages of the crisis. I mean that in times of the pandemic crisis, the agencies like KDCA usually don't have much power over the Minister of Health or Minister of Finance or Minister of Interior, can take the charge of the leading role in the governing in management of the crisis crisis. To achieve this, we believe that the KDCA, the key organization in the pandemic response, needs to be strengthened to be a more robust node and have more interaction with other relevant organizations and ministries. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, many countries have established the operated National Public Health Institute similar to the KDCA. However, there are still many countries which do not have a National Public Health Institute, and in some cases, the role of the National Public Health Institute has been limited to the research and the laboratory work. Therefore, to efficiently respond to the next global pandemic, the National Public Health Institute need to be strengthened as a specialized administrative bodies at the individual country level. I think that the way the KDCA has evolved, especially the way it has dramatically expanded its budget and staffing and strengthening its legal status, is unique in the world. Korea will share this experience with other countries and work closely together for global health security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Many lives lost that could have been avoided due to weaknesses in the governance of the pandemic crisis. Professor Gostin told us about lessons learned at global level. Professor Hashimoto told about lessons from Japan, and Professor Young made the essential question about power and governance, about public trust and the Korean experience. We have some minutes if any have a question or comment, please. If you can help with the microphone. Please, when you made the comments or the question, said it if for Professor Gostin or Hashimoto or Professor Yang, please. No. Another one?
Thank you. Thank you for your great talks and great and very insightful talks. And I'm Yongjin from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and I have a question about the talks from Dr. Lawrence Gostin. And on your third suggestion of diversifying health financing mechanisms, the different organizations have different logics of rationality and doable decisions. And for example, the WHO doesn't have a full or a sufficient degree of control over their decisions. And for example, the World Bank, it already has developed its pandemic financing schemes and like pandemic bonds that diversify the risk of pandemic to the capital market. But there are also observations that that financing scheme didn't work out very well when facing the Ebola outbreak and also the COVID-19 pandemic. So my question is that why don't we just raise more money for the WHO, which has a right focus on health, when facing the future pandemic, and gives it more control over pandemic-related issues and problems?
It's a very, very good question. In fact, I just got the same question today from Geneva. Historically, the World Health Organization has relied solely on its member states for financing, and governments around the world have been reluctant to give WHO money for various reasons. Most of the financing these days is more bilateral or through public-private partnerships like the Gavi Alliance or CEPI, and not to WHO. So WHO has no independent means to gain funding. There has been a number of proposals, but none of them have gone very far. One of them that the World Health Assembly just adopted recently, but it's untested and it's unclear whether it would work, is to use the Global Fund's model of a replenishment fund. And the other is that in the negotiating text of the pandemic treaty, there is very vague language about WHO being the repository for financing of pandemic response. There's no real way that WHO can do that, whereas the bank is a development bank. It's got money, although not enough, and it's not devoted much to it. So financing has become a huge sticking point. I agree with you that WHO should have the capacity itself to finance pandemic response and health systems. It doesn't, and it doesn't even have enough money for its own operations, let alone helping others. It provides technical assistance, scientific guidelines, norms, and the like. But financing has always been a problem for WHO. There are lots of initiatives in place, as I've mentioned, to try to change that, but nothing that convinces me that anything will fundamentally change. I can't see WHO becoming a financing arm of pandemic response. Should it? Yes. Will it? I'm dubious.
Thank you. Another question? Yes.
Hi, Ashley Fox, Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy. And my question is for Professor Gaston, but also the other two speakers, and sort of related to financing or adjacent to it. But I mean, my understanding of a lot of these financing mechanisms is that they're about financing the sort of immediate pandemic response. But it seems to me that one of the biggest lessons from COVID was that it's not just, you know, the immediate money that you need to respond in a tangible way to the pandemic, but the economic impacts that a pandemic has. And I think, I'm just curious for Professor Gaston's perspective on, are there any discussions around how to better mitigate economic impacts? Because in my view, that's also what affected the politics of the response to the pandemic. And then just for the other two, I'm just curious what the economic impact, or like what the response was within Korea and Japan to the economic impacts, and how successful that was.
Yeah, sure. It's a very good question. So broadly speaking, there are at least three major needs for financing or purposes. One is financing resilient health systems. So the International Health Regulations has what's called core health system capacities. And there's a lot of fights over whether or not they should be independently evaluated and the like. But there's been no funding mechanism other than Article 44 of the International Health Regulations that generally asks high-income countries to provide assistance. They haven't. It's never been used. The second is financing for actual preparedness and response, and the response capabilities. Again, the only one that I'm aware of now is the bank's pandemic fund, but it's woefully inadequate. And WHO is being asked in the pandemic negotiating text to do something. I don't think it will. The third is recovery funding, which is what you were referring to. So if you actually look at what the purposes of the pandemic treaty are, it's supposed to be pandemic preparedness, pandemic prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. The first and the last have been a dead letter. There has been no prevention, really, which is really the, preventing zoonotic spillovers and things like that. Most of it's been on preparedness, health systems, and response. Recovery is in the title, that's it. There is nothing that I foresee, but it's obviously very, very important to any kind of resiliency in the face of a pandemic or other health emergency.
Thank you very much. Professor, you like to say something? Or?
Maybe very shortly. Yeah, just for the reporting to Japan. And as you may know, the Japan government did not take their coercive lockdown and simply the voluntary basis social distancing. And the government took the very serious the subsidy funding for support the small business such as the restaurants. And even though we did have some economic impact as I showed in their slides, but still and some medical background people said that the government should have taken the more stronger coercive power. But personally, I think the Japanese government did a nice balance between the infection control and the economic control.
Thank you. Professor?
So I think in Korea, the funding mechanism is working relatively very well. So with the crisis management, the decision-making system, the Minister of Finance act very promptly, and they increased the budget for the pandemic response, especially dedicated to the KDCA, to a very the big amount. So the KDCA's the budget in normal times was maybe it was. I can calculate it US dollars very quickly, but it was increased more than 7 times during the COVID-19 pandemic. But one of the problem in Korea is when we make some compensations for the self-employed and the small business owners for the loss of income during the social distancing measures in the pandemic, it was very late compared to the other countries, because Korea doesn't have the pre-existing compensation system before the COVID-19 pandemic. So we established a new law to make a legal basis for the compensation to these people, but it was done in 2021. And the actual the compensation was started almost at the end of the 2021. It was, but at that time, most the self-employed and the small business owners are already felt some great difficulties in managing their lives. So that was one of the lessons in Korea. So we need to institutionalize the compensation mechanism before the pandemic, and we need to develop our system from the lessons learned from the pandemic.
Thank you. We have time only for two questions. First, you.
Yeah, thank you.
Last.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Jesse Bump from the Harvard School of Public Health. I wanted to ask Professor Hashimoto about a time dimension. It was my impression that Japan did really well at the beginning of the pandemic and then did a little less well at the middle and later on. And I kind of wondered, what does that mean for governance? Since you probably wouldn't have seen a big switch in the governance personnel in the middle, I wonder what implications that trend might have had for governance. And for Professor Gostin, I wanted to ask if I think that the member states performed much worse than WHO did in the pandemic. I don't know if you agree with that assessment or not, but I wanted to ask, how would changing the IHR get better performance out of the member states when they appear not to want to collaborate? Is there anything we can do about that? Or I'm sure you thought about it, but I'd love to hear you speculate. Thank you.
In very short, in the first stage, we did have the existing the public health the sector network, which worked well for the first wave, but it is easily overwhelmed. And over the time, that we need the re-establishment of the local network, which takes time.
Well, you're always astute, and I agree with you. I agree with you very much. I think it's a twofold problem. The first one is getting member states simply to comply with the norms of the IHR, which didn't happen, with travel restrictions and other aspects. That in and of itself is a big problem. The problem you're relating to is an even deeper one and probably more important, which is the failure of solidarity, cooperation, and the like. There is, Articles 43 and 44 of the International Health Regulations get to that question of international cooperation and assistance, but they really collapsed. I actually even wrote a paper called "The Collapse of Solidarity During the Pandemic." Countries seem to revert to their own national interests. Certainly the United States did, but many countries did. And so how an international system through WHO, through international instruments, can foster that cooperation, it's a difficult question. I think the only way you can do it is to actually have mechanisms to try to get them to do it through a system of incentives, compliance, standards, and things like that. But you've put your finger on an extraordinarily important but difficult problem that I wish I knew how to solve, but I actually don't.
Thank you. Please, the last question.
My question is for Hashimoto. Yes. You spoke about the decentralized administrative structure in Japan, and with the predictions of another pandemic forming, how does the aging population of Japan factor into efficiency rates and maintaining your population size?
That's a difficult question for the limited 1 minute on the last minute. Yeah, but the decentralized system is something that Japan has to rely on forever, maybe. And but we also had some discussion to make the similar kind of command systems and following the KCDC systems. But we don't know which works well and which works better. And maybe I kind of totally agree with you on the last slide that we need some kind of a nice combination. Yeah, there'll be something that we want to pursue and maybe can share with our lessons.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for all. Luckily, the human being learn, and in the field of governance, there are a lot of challenges. Yes. Good afternoon, and thank you very much.